Dominate, you say? Okay. I'll block with one card from hand. Reactions?
Okay, so the reaction step is a game state where players may use reactions related to combat. First, the turn player gains priority, and I will pass.
Well, welcome everybody to the reaction step. As you can tell, there's only two of us. Isaac is on a spirit quest right now, seeking enlightenment, and he's training his body and his mind in preparation for the upcoming Pro Quest
I heard he's
this weekend.
practicing dice rolls.
He's doing everything. He's practicing his shuffle, the perfect force in which to play cards, posture, everything.
You know,
He's becoming a new man. Cue the montage.
I just want so he should like bring a cup with the dice and like shake them real hard and then slam them on the table. I feel like that would be like the new cool way of rolling dice as brute.
Yeah. Odd or even. Yeah. Yeah. He funny thing about a cup is when we play D&D, he routinely would just bring like a coffee mug all the way from his house with all of his dice in it and travel that all the way to my house.
Just
I was
holding
like,
it.
"You got yeah, yeah, I guess. I don't know how he does it in the car." It's like, "You got to get a different situation."
I
Which
mean,
he's found something slightly better, but
only
anyway,
slightly.
this po this reaction step is not all about Isaac, okay?
Oh,
He's the handsome, accomplished one, and he gets enough credit. But so today, me and Colin are going to talk about the new rules preview that has dropped on LSS's website, and we'll just kind of go over our thoughts about it and what it means and interesting things we've found and that sort of stuff. So put on your tweed coat and get your chalkboards ready because we're about to slip into a lecture.
yeah. You might need an abacus. I'm not sure. Well,
I'm not sure either. Okay, Colin, give me kind of just an overview of what we're seeing in the Rules 2.0 preview.
totally. So I think first off is like it's a huge reworking, basically from the ground up, of the comprehensive rules. The last couple iterations were, minor updates for the most part, with a lot of help from the community, but this one seems just a fundamentally different beast of a document. And I use that word very specifically because it is dense and a
Hmm.
little bit not it's not rough, but like it reads like a programming like,
Hmm.
you know, documentation.
Right.
Which I think it's good in a lot of ways, and I think it's going to be a bit of a rough transition for anybody that was used to the old rules. But yeah, it seems like they've gone out of their way to define things as clearly and precisely as possible and not leave, or have fewer things that were kind of, you know, stated but never really clarified. And, they're really breaking it down to the most like minute definitions, including my favorite under players 1.1.1. A player is a person participating in the game. So if you didn't know that,
Yeah,
you know
totally.
where it is. It's on page one, so it's easy to find.
So, well, this rules out any kind of like airbud situations, right? So, like, it specifically states a person. I guess it doesn't specifically state that a dog cannot play flesh and blood, but a
I,
dog
I
potentially is also not a person.
that's true, but I think it actually opens up for an airbud situation because
Oh, crap.
you could just have your dog come in and he's not a player, but he might be assisting you in the game. You know,
That's true. I guess it
he rolls
rules
the
out.
dice for you.
Does it rule out androids then?
I
Or is
mean,
that a whole other philosophical topic?
it might get into a more philosophical topic.
Okay. Well, so it seems that rules 2.0 have not cleared up the hard-hitting questions we need. Um, yeah, I agree with you that now, so like before the rules were like learning how to play a game, you know what I mean? Like a rule book. It was like a rule book. Now the rules are I don't know what I guess you've already said it, but now it's just really hard to comprehend what's going on because there's all these new terms, right? So, like you said, they're breaking stuff down into like tiny bits. So now we have objects, we have macros, we have events, which you can have multiple different events that trigger, and I thought we were already deep into it with a stack and layers, but now there's um, so much more of that stuff. So it
Mm.
makes it quite a bit harder to understand what's going on. And you have to which it does, it defines all of the terms, but in like the most dry way possible,
Yeah,
you know?
and
So it,
obviously the goal is to leave as little room for
yeah,
loose interpretation as possible, and I think that is kind of required just based on how many situational like weird judge questions have come up, and like I mean there's a whole Discord now just for judge questions, and
yeah.
there's weird stuff that happens. So I think this will lead us there, but it's as someone who loves reading rule books, like I was like, oh my god, this might be too much of a. It's like more of like a war game rule book,
Yeah,
where
totally.
they're
Yeah,
like if they're like they come with two rule books, and it's like if you want to just play the game, do this, and then if you have a question, look at this one,
yeah,
which
totally.
I think makes sense. I think you said before is like the old one was kind of a learn to play. And I think it was like halfway in between a learn to play and a really comprehensive rules. And I think that's where it kind of fell a little flat.
Right.
It
Yeah.
introduced a lot of things in the order that makes sense to learn to play a game. But I think at
Mhm.
this point, people aren't going to this document to learn to play the game. They're looking for the exact details of how things interact. And they keep coming up with new ways for things to interact, and it seems like they're future proofing things a little bit more. I'm very curious about what a macro is.
Well, okay. So this is something, I mean, good segue into like things they've cleared up or left ambiguous, but I wanted to read what an object is
Mm,
first. So objects are a card, token, macro, or a layer in the game. So basically anything. And that's just like a really broad term, but it's like also objects can have one or more properties, and apparently it can also be a permanent. Um, so it's just, I don't know. Even though we're now using this term object to talk about how stuff interacts with it, it's still just like broad enough to be confusing, right?
I think the best part here, I'm just going to point these out every time I find them. A permanent remains a permanent until it leaves the arena.
Yeah, totally. And then a macro is an object in the arena that is neither a card nor a token. Macros are objects used to generate static, continuous effects that last a long or indefinite period of time, right? How long is a long period of time? You know?
Yeah, and there's no examples, which
Yeah,
is
totally.
interesting, which makes me feel like it's probably setting up either a future kind of keyword or ability or something like that. But it's very. The only thing I could think of is like, would like a intellect penalty count as like a macro? But I don't know. It's not
Uh,
in the
I don't
arena.
know. They just the properties of a macro are defined by the effect that created it.
Oh,
And a macro is not considered part of a player's deck. If it leaves the arena, it ceases to exist, and the owner of a macro is the player instructed to create it.
that's so
So I have no idea.
yeah, really interesting. I'm curious if that uh, is leaning towards like a PVE situation because it does seem like they've laid these rules out in a way that supports all formats and perhaps format unknown or future formats. But
Totally. A macro is also not a card,
yeah,
even if it is represented by an official Flesh and Blood card. So it's like a static, I guess, ability. So, like where what I think it is like Chains of Eminence, right? Has
mm,
that ability while it's in the arena, and the macro is the effect it is producing, I think.
interesting. I would have thought that was more of an event, but this is
See,
where
exactly.
this is where
So,
we're at now. So
yeah. Um, so I mean, just try not to like control F find everything in the rules document
yeah,
for everybody to just listen to us read rules. These are just examples of like what you have to go through to figure out edge case um, scenarios,
yeah,
or try to figure out what the real um, I guess workaround is. What I really think is going to be hilarious is because we have done this a lot as a friend group or whatever, is you'll be playing a game and some weird thing will happen and you'll like pull up these rules to try to figure it out, on the internet mid game, and you're just like, what is happening? Is this a macro? Is this an object? What kind of event did I make? Is this a triggered layer effect? I don't know.
yeah,
And obviously that's why there's like a Discord channel
yeah, yeah. Shout
for
out to
this and
the
that sort
Judge Hub because they are on it and usually very friendly and good
of.
at
Mhm.
explaining things that up until they explained it, I was like, there's no way that they're going to explain this in a way I understand. And then they do, and you're like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah,
That
totally.
that does make sense. Yeah, I think, the big difference for me is that, like, it seems that the reorganization is really because they've defined things very specifically, like you're now going to have to know what a thing is and then go to that definition. Whereas previously it felt like a lot of things were explained kind of in the kind of action phase, combat resolution stuff. That's where we got all the rune chants, popping on Spectra with a attack action but not a weapon. And, now like I don't know where that is, but I'm sure it's
Yeah.
somewhere, related to either a weapon static ability or like the wherever so it's like there's gonna be a transition where we have to relearn the kind of terminology and understand what each type of thing which type of object this card creates and
Hmm.
you know and then go from there and figure out the new location for these things. And I think once we get there it'll be a little easier, but it is a little hard because sometimes
Totally.
the examples they're just like it's very specific, which it has to be, I think, but you know it doesn't seem like you can always kind of extract something you can generally apply from that example to like other things. So you're like, okay, well that makes sense, but what about this thing? And I think this
Hmm.
came up specifically when Mitch had pointed out that there was the kind of change in how Fine Center works and the new rules. Whereas
Hmm.
previously, Fine Center was Here, I'll read what find center does just so we have a baseline. Um, it has text says find center can't be defended by cards with costs less than the number of chain links you control. And so previously it was interpreted that you can't block with any equipment because they don't have a cost, so therefore their cost was 0 and there was less than the number of chain links you control, which made it a really powerful card if you could get that combo off and get the Zen state. Like it's,
Mm-hmm.
totally game shifting sometimes. But under the new rules in section 1.8.6, it states, I'm just going to read the rules to you now because that's what we're here for. If an effect
Yep.
refers to the value of a property, it infers the existence of the property as well as its value. If an object does not have that property, it does not meet the condition of the existence of the property, and thus the condition of the value of the property. So in their example, which, thank God they have an example because I wouldn't have understood this, was what they were saying. They were saying that find center can be interpreted as find center cannot be defended by cards with the cost property if the value of the cost property is less than the number of chain links you control. This means cards without the cost property, such as Ironrot Helm, would be able to defend the attack. So in this case, and I kind of brought this up because we were talking about, well, does that apply to like Crown of Reflection, where you can destroy an aura and then put an aura from your hand with cost equal or less into the arena? And we were wondering if you could destroy a spectral shield and put in a 0 cost, because the spectral shield doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have a cost. So if it doesn't have a cost and this requires a cost, then can you not put anything in? And, the way it was explained to me was that, in the case of find center, it's looking at a specific cost. It's saying it has to be a cost less than this.
Right.
And when that specific cost does not exist, uh, it doesn't apply. So it's
Mm-hmm.
looking for something that has a cost and that the cost is less.
Right. Whereas crown is just crown of reflection.
Mhm.
Now we have multiple crowns. Is looking for just if there is a cost, not a specific one. Right. That's the difference.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
saying if it's, and this is the way someone explained it to me. I didn't write down who it was, but thank you. It says the spectral shield's cost counts as 0 because in this case, the effect is looking at a card with a null cost to return a cost. So
Mm-hmm.
it's totally legal to destroy the spectral shield because the condition is that you destroy an aura. So you destroy your
Mm-hmm.
aura and it's looking for the cost. If the cost is null, rather than, break the math of the game, it says that it's 0, and we don't throw a a compiler error in our
Mm-hmm.
new rules. And so, so that's like the main difference. So when it's looking for
Right.
like a specific cost, then it's saying that it requires the cost property and it's looking at the cost. But if it's checking a cost for something that doesn't have it, then it's considered to be 0. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
you know, even then I'm like, okay, that makes sense for those 2 examples, but everywhere else I'm still going to be a little bit confused. Um, but yeah, it's really gonna be interesting to like. I still haven't parsed like half this rule set, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking forward to more of the kind of articles coming out that will describe any changes and stuff like that. And I
Mm-hmm.
haven't seen too many other kind of blatant changes to how kind of previously understood things have worked, but I'm sure there's something there that either I've missed or
I think Reprise on
that's right.
warrior cards has changed, so now it continuously checks until it resolves, not when it's played.
Yeah.
I believe is the change. So you can play uh Iron Song response, and then if they play a defense reaction from hand for whatever reason,
Yep.
then that would Iron Song response has not yet resolved
Yep.
because the reaction step is still live. So then it would get the +3 if it was the red still. So,
Well, it's not even that the reaction step's still alive, is that you didn't pass
oh, right. You didn't pass. Yeah.
and
Yep.
let it resolve. And I think it's good and bad. I think it's good because it was weird that reprise was this keyword that happened like not on resolution. Like most keywords like resolve with the card. It's like you play barraging beatdown and it's going to intimidate, and if you're playing wizard you can respond before that intimidate happens, because it hasn't resolved yet. But all of a sudden it's
Yeah.
like, oh well, but reprise is different. And I think previous to that it was just like always check, so if you ever blocked it was happening, which didn't make sense either. So I think they finally kind of figured out what makes sense. It's just a little bit weird that you need to make sure that you pass, but let it resolve, and then play your defense reaction from hand, because I know someone's gonna be like, oh well, you triggered my reprise. Well, it's just like, okay, cool, like you got me.
Totally. It's helpful for the warrior player too, because then you can, play out, like Iron Song response. And if they have to, yeah, I don't know. If they mess up, you can kind of get them a little bit, but um, it's just a weirder timing and communication that you have to like work around now with Warrior, which is a little annoying for an already fiddly class anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
with the number of prison players in general, I feel like people have learned a lot about priority. So
mhm. Yeah,
that isn't too much more, but it is, it's hard that they keep changing it. I think this seems like the final form, but we'll see.
yeah. So yeah, my like big concern with this is just that like it's something that I was worried about in the beginning of the game, that the game would be a little bit too complicated to appeal to like casual audiences and then would potentially fail, right?
Mhm.
Um and these rules definitely make it look really, really complicated with like these um talking about objects, etc., macros.
Yep.
Um, so I don't know, what that does for the new player base trying to get into the game as our interactions get, excuse me, more and more complicated, or how to define them gets more complicated. I'm not sure what the impact of that is, if it will impact the new players
Yep.
even at all, because the game is still exactly the same as it was. It's not like you said, there hasn't been a huge overhaul on like a lot of really key things in the way those interact and that sort of thing. But it does make it, I suppose, a bit harder to parse through stuff. And I mean, we can't say enough how the Judge Hub on the on Discord is just such an invaluable resource, because there's no like Googling it and finding a Reddit thread or anything like that. It's like, you know, people are there live at all times.
Totally. Yeah. Shout out to Josh Scott too, because
Yeah.
he's ever since he's joined, he's done a really great job at reining in the rules. I mean, he was like the official head judge of the game before he even got hired, for the most
Hmm.
part. And personally, he was the first person I ever played Flesh and Blood with
Nice.
online. We played on TTS. He taught me how to play, basically. And super nice guy. Really, really good at explaining things and really cares about the game. So,
Hmm.
you know, I do agree that it is. I mean, it's just a complicated game. I don't, and there's
Yeah.
nothing to do about it. And it's only going to get more complicated with every talent that gets added. Is just a new mechanic, basically, which
Yeah.
all kind of revolve around the same things, where they're costs or zones that you can interact with, and different kind of manipulation of the boards or board state, game state, and things like that, which is inevitable. And I mean, for me, it's why I like the game. I think when they come out with something new, I'm very interested. Like Heave. I think Heave is super cool. I don't even play Guardian, but it's just like that's a fun one. It's like
Yeah.
I think it's the most thematic, one of the most thematic keywords. So it's just like
Hmm.
into
Hmm.
Arsenal, and then
Yeah.
So I am concerned that as the game continues, the entry point is weird for new players. I think
Yeah.
the probably the best entry point is always going to be limited. It's focused on one set. Everybody's doing the same thing. There's no cards from other, no cards or no
Mm.
talents from other sets, and it's like you kind of learn that game, and then you expand from there, which
Yeah.
is going to be more complicated than Welcome to Wraith. Always,
Hmm.
Arcane Rising was just. It's always going to be more complicated than that first kind of touch point that some of us had, but I am interested to see what their new kind of starter product is going to look like because
Yeah.
James did say, I think in the Flake interview, that the next the kind of like question mark release in Q2 or whatever is going to be a new starter kind of set. And I'm really curious as to what they are going to do there, which heroes they're going to pick, or like how they're going to package that to help new players and even established players like buy something and be like, okay, I'm going to teach you with this thing. And I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that's even like almost more important, is like giving people who care about the game a way to easily introduce it to people. That's not just like, well, let me open up a box and we're going to play limited, and or
Yeah.
like here's a
Yeah.
blitz deck
Totally.
and we're going to play blitz, which is kind of broken. And if you die on turn two, just know that there's another version of the game that you can play when you grow up a bit more.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. So I think that's going to be a really interesting product. Um, not only because like new players are going to have to get in, it's got to be a great point for new players, but you got to kind of figure out why existing players would buy it too, right? So it's got to have some market value to them.
They'll
Um,
put something in there that you're like, ooh.
Totally. Like a new young hero, like we
Hmm.
get a young illusionist, right? That's not talented or something like that.
Oh god, what if
Um,
they make an adult Ira in that?
that would be funny. Uh, less good, I think, in CC than in Blitz.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's like a different
Sorry.
rabbit hole. But I mean, it's just like, LSS should have a product that is like the, community commoner, free blitz decks that people are giving out. That's what we did in my local scene for people to like learn how to play the game and understand it and get to see more than just the Ira decks and that sort of thing. And I know other people have done like, quote unquote battle boxes where you have like four heroes and they're specifically designed to, like rock, paper, scissors one another, or lizard Spock, or however, whatever the diagram is for that. So if LSS has a product like that, I think that would go like a long way into helping people outside of limited, which
Yeah.
I do agree that limited is like a really great way to learn how to play the game, but there's just like a few more decision points in sealed than there are to like picking up one of the starter decks or something with like slightly easier heroes, because sometimes they get like more complicated, like the Levia starter deck. That is like a terrible place to figure out how to play the game from you
Yeah.
know
I think,
um
I enjoyed the original starter decks. I
hmm.
like that
Yeah.
you could play. It's like, here, just play with the young hero first. Like, it's going to be a shorter game. You play with the same size deck, and you just play it and figure things out. And then as you get more comfortable, you flip it over and you play like the longer game, which I think there's like way too much kind of like, I don't know, hesitance from people to play constructed. They're like, oh, well, it takes so long. And it's like, not really. I think back in the day when it was like a very mid-range control meta, game would take an hour plus if you were new to it. But, you know, we play a game in like 20, 30 minutes now. And that's even with like spending a bit of time figuring things out. So, I think there's got to be, I hope that it's either kind of both, like, okay, if you want to do blitz, play, I mean, I think
Yeah.
trying to make it blitz and constructed is less good. I hope it's like you play it with the young hero, play with the older hero, and figure it
Yeah,
out.
I mean, they could have like we're just really in the rabbit hole here, but they could have like a sideboard guide, right?
Mm,
Like, oh, if you want to play the young here, like here's your 60 cards, right? It's a 60 card deck, and then here's your um plan for if you want to take cards out to have blitz, right? And
mm,
then these are cards back in. So it kind of maybe introduces you into how much a deck can change with the exclusion or addition of cards. So
yep.
that could be, a helpful learning tool there. But regardless, so back to the rules a little bit.
Mm,
Maybe the final thing I wanted to touch on is that the rules for concession have changed, which I think this is kind of like the biggest and best thing that the new rules have done is so that now you can concede your game before time runs out, and you just have to call a judge over when you're going to concede your game.
yep.
Am I missing any details in there about that?
I think, I mean, it's still like the rules of like you cannot ask someone to concede are still
Right.
there. And I think that's the very important part. And, encourage anyone who goes to any events coming up. If someone pressures you in any way, like you just call a judge. Like it's not cool and we want to keep that out of the game. Like, if
Yeah.
it could easily go that way. Like, oh, just, like, and like people like that need to be like taught a lesson that they shouldn't like put people in uncomfortable situations like that. But I guess you that is like they can't ask for it after decks have been presented. I think before then
Mhm.
you could discuss it. They still have kind of like the rules of you can decide to intentionally draw together, or you can ask someone to concede so that like you can bubble in with them. I don't know. But yeah, I think it still seems that you have to have like a reason for disc, or does it say any
Mhm.
reason? Let's see.
So the folks at home can follow along. Which rule section are we in there?
Well, the tournament rules are separate. So
Oh, right, right, right.
these are going to be in the tournament rules section on the website. I'm looking at the update article,
Hmm.
but the yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
sorry,
Go ahead.
I shouldn't be reading this silently in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a good change. I think there was too many times when people knew that they had basically lost the game and they wanted to be able to concede because they didn't want, and it was like going to go to time because there's no way for the other person to like proactively kill them enough, which, you know, I'm not sure if there's like any rules on just like no blocks and I die situation. Um, but it does feel like this is a good call and hopefully allows people to kind of deal with those end of round situation, like
Yeah,
immediately
exactly.
prior to
Like,
end of round, like situations where it's like, well, damn, like I really lost this one, but like this person's gonna draw and like not make it to top eight
yeah,
because we
yeah.
can't finish the game.
Yeah, so like let's say there's like 12 turns left, but you only have like, 40 seconds and you're up against control and, they have just such a health lead that you don't need, like the game is going to be played out over the next 10 minutes, but you don't have 10 minutes
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to lose. So you can concede that game,
Yeah.
right? And it does say that we are now officially allowing players to concede at any point during the game before time is called for any reason.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for.
Yeah, and a judge still must be called over to oversee the concession to ensure players are not being pressured to concede. A player can still not ask for a concession after decks have been presented, and a player can still not concede without being DQ'd after time is called without a genuine reason of why they need to stop playing the match to completion,
Yep.
which is nice. I like this addition. I mean, the other little tidbit in the article too is like that I'm maybe jumping ahead here, but anyway, let me go back to concession. I think that is great for the game, right? Because I've definitely been in that scenario where you're like, well, I guess we just have to tie because you didn't kill me, and that sucks. Even though you're going to win this game,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I can't concede. So now it's good that I personally have that onus,
Mm-hmm.
to say like, judge, uh, I need to concede because there's no way I can win,
Yep.
right? And which has come up, right? Like I think Um, Steven from Team Covenant has like a really great uh anecdote from one of the sealed or limited callings where he was like, you know, I for sure could win. I'm going to win this game and I can show you exactly how I'm going to win this game, judge. And they, kind of got mad at him that he shouldn't be talking that way. But now him and their opponent, like you can know, like, oh yeah, I'm not gonna win.
Yep. It's
You know,
still on the opponent to be,
concede.
yeah,
Yeah,
be the better person in some situations, which is not always going to happen. Some people, you know,
totally.
either rightly or wrongly believe that they have a chance no matter what. Uh,
Yeah,
and you know, but it is overall it just allows for a better kind of behavior and sportsmanship that I think is really good and will help kind of cut to a minimum the really crappy feeling of having to draw when you both know what was going to happen.
yeah, totally. So I think that's really positive. The other thing that's in the article is that IP5s are now downgraded to IP4s. And that is just for kind of the simple fact that an IP5, it basically just means you lose. And an IP4 means there's a way for you to conceivably still play the game and not just lose on the spot. So
Mm-hmm.
that's good that they recognized that and made a change there. Still don't get an IP4 and you'll be fine.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
games are much shorter than they used to be too. So I think in the original format, it might have been okay. Like you can block out and live, but I think the damage is too crazy right now to you just lose the game, as you say.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially, yeah. For 5 turns, it's too much. Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on, Colin, before we get out of here, or anything like that?
No, I mean I'm excited to see if any kind of changes occur, if people have found any inconsistencies, have been able to parse this whole 76-page document, which is 20 pages longer than the previous rule set,
Hmm.
and have found some stuff. I believe I would be surprised if they do, but I think I'm really excited to see the like kind of more in-depth articles on the implications of the new rule set and if they're going to hint at what some of these kind of new uh, defined terms mean, especially macro. I'm like, I want to know what a macro is and I want to make one.
You make macros all the time, bro.
Yeah.
You are a macro.
Thank you. I'm glad you noticed. I've been working on it.
Yeah, that's what friends are for. Cool. Well, thank you everybody for following along with us, and hopefully we made some things easier or potentially tougher for you to understand. Look for our next episode of our podcast where we will be kind of diving into the early parts of the ProQuest, and you can find that on all podcast formats and that sort of thing. Thank you again, Colin. Love you, bro. You do a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. Love you too.
Sweet. Okay, that's it. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.